The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to IACET's Professional Development Webinar Series. My name is Alexa, IACET's Accreditation and Training Coordinator, and I'm pleased to be your host for today. We would like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsor, Badger, for their commitment to promoting the value of continuing education through verifiable micro-credentialing using open digital badges. Let's take a brief moment to hear from them.
Your learners are on a lifelong journey. Should you recognize and reward their achievements with digital credentials? Badger Pro makes it easy. Issues secure, shareable digital badges that stack on visible, trackable pathways to even more meaningful credentials. Award badges from your LMS, your AMS, and from live events. Track badge data as learners share your brand to social media, on websites, and in email signatures. Get started with Badger, the easiest way to issue digital badges.
Once again, we say thank you very much to Badger for their support. For today's webinar, we will be looking at the why and how of coaching for trainers. Our speaker today will be Kathy Liska, and I'll introduce her in just a few moments. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to participants within 48 hours on our website under Archived Webinars. Since all phone lines will be muted throughout today's presentation so that there are no interruptions, if you have a question, please type it into the questions field in the icon box. The questions will come through to us and we will be able to address them throughout the webinar. Feel free to also use the raise hand icon if you'd like to verbally ask your question and we can unmute you. And we do welcome questions throughout the time, the duration of our presentation today, so don't hold back. Keep in mind, you will also receive a link to a survey evaluation after the webinar has ended. We would appreciate any feedback as it not only provides insight for IACET staff, but also for our webinar presenters. Kathy also has provided a copy of her slide deck, which you can access in the Handouts tab of your GoToWebinar panel. We encourage you to use this if you find it will enhance your learning experience. And now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Kathy Liska. Kathy Liska is the CEO and founder of Effect Services, the Center for Coaching Solutions, and the Center for Coaching Certification. As the guide from the side, she is recognized among the best internationally in coaching, training, conflict management, and facilitation. Kathy is a sought-after trainer and coach, drawing from her 20 years of experience in business ownership and management. Kathy serves as a certified master coach and certifies others to coach in her ICF-approved program. Her personal mission statement is people. Kathy is known for her passion in sharing the insight, experience, positive attitude, and information that empower others to achieve the results that they desire. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Kathy.
All right, wonderful. And thank you so much. I definitely appreciate being here and am very excited about what we're going to be talking about today. As a matter of fact, maybe a little bit too excited. I'm very passionate about the topic and looking forward to the conversation. As we get started, I'm actually curious where all of you are from, and I'm interested in what's happening for you because of COVID. So what I'm going to invite you to do is in the question box, type where you're calling in from, and then give us your biggest challenge and your biggest benefit as a result of what's happening with COVID. And so while we're giving all of you a chance to do that, I'm going to go ahead and move forward into what our agenda is for the conversation today. So first off, we're going to get some working definitions so we have a common understanding of some of the things we'll talk about. We'll move into the why of coaching. And as we're exploring the why, we're going to talk facts. So we'll share some statistics, very specific things that basically make the case, the ROI of coaching. We'll move into the application for you. So that's where we're going to talk about the how. How do you actually use this? You can use it during training. You can use it after training. And then, of course, time left at the end will be reserved for Q&A. So we're getting some responses in the question box. Let's see, we've got New Jersey, Colorado, North Carolina, New York, California, Virgin Islands, Florida. I'm also from Florida. Love that one. Another one from California. We've got Chicago, Kansas. So spread out. That's awesome. Some have shared challenges in terms of not having the training events. They've moved to the virtual training. Biggest challenge is managing time because you're working longer since you're at home. Let's see, shifted your team to remote work full time. Summer camps, having issues with pools not opening, nowhere to go on field trips. That's a big one for families. Been hearing some of that from people that I talk with. Let's see, understanding the challenges, missing the socializing. Lots of great input there. So managing time, figuring out what to do with face-to-face events, challenge the boundaries between work and home life, changing to doing training online. So yeah, lots of great things going on. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's fun to know we're all in this together and to know that we have other people out there facing the same challenges and experiencing some of the benefits that are coming out of it. So let's dive into the definitions. Oh, sorry, getting ahead of myself. First, of course, and this being IACET, we've got to do this, our learning outcomes for today. So we're going to list specific facts and statistics regarding coaching and training. And since you have access to the handout, you have access to those as well. We'll define coaching skills to use during training, as well as coaching activities to use during training. And then how to consider options for incorporating coaching after training. First off, a description of coaching. And I love the language in this description. It is a strategic partnership. And what's huge here is that it's a partnership. Coaching is very, very different than training insofar as when you're doing training, you are the expert. And there's a power differential in that position in terms of what you're offering. When it's a coaching engagement, we truly come in as partners, and it is the job of the coach to empower the client. So that person is clarifying their own goals, creating their own action plans, figuring out how they're going to move past obstacles and achieve what it is they want. This description comes from the International Coach Federation. Their exact definition of coaching is that it's partnering with clients. Again, that word partnering. And then the rest of it just gets even more fun. Thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And the key words here are, it really is about them and putting them in the driver's seat and putting them in charge. That ownership, the buy-in, and ultimately the follow-through because of that. Now, in terms of training, there's a million different definitions out there. And of course, this is risky with so many trainers on the call. Hence, using the Merriam-Webster definition, that it's about teaching a particular skill or type of behavior. Now, we know there's so much more involved in training. There's the needs assessment, the planning, the evaluating. There's all kinds of things going on. So that's super simplified. If you look at the Association for Talent Development, on their website, they have a competency model for professional trainers, and it specifically includes coaching. So their model shows 3 key areas. One of them is developing professional capability, and within that is the coaching competency. So this is a link to where on their website you can find the description of learning coaching for professional trainers. So if we look at what this means, the trainer is there to improve workplace productivity by increasing knowledge or skill. The coach is empowering the individual to discover and maximize their own potential. The trainer has their work focused on organizational objectives, and they report to the organization. The coach is focused completely on the client and empowering them. So the person they're coaching is considered the client. The organization in the coaching space is considered the sponsor. So there's a different responsibility in terms of who we're working with. That brings us to the paradox. So coaching is a skill set that can be used in all walks of life. I often say I'm a better mom and grandma because I've learned coaching. The skills are used in training, mentoring, managing, counseling, therapy, consulting, and any kind of a leadership role. Alternatively, the skills that are gained as trainers, mentors, managers, counselors, therapists, consultants, or leaders are actually inappropriate when you're coaching. That's our paradox. So let's dig into the facts of coaching. We know that we can maximize the impact of what you're doing with your training program by offering coaching, including it inside the training and offering it after training. So how do we know this? First fact for you. When you do training, the productivity increase is 22.4%. When you add coaching, the productivity gain goes up to 88%, 4 times the impact. And this study was done by Public Personnel Management. Here's another one. Xerox Corporation did a study and said, if we don't do coaching after training, 87% of the skills change is lost. And we all know that. As trainers, we've looked at that. People are there, they get excited, they're motivated, they walk out the door, and within days, they're forgetting the vast majority of what they gained. And so coaching is a tool that absolutely makes sense to combine with training. Now, here's another one. And this is purely looking at coaching in and of itself. The ROI in this Metrics Global study was found at 529%. When they added the benefits from employee retention, that boosts the ROI to 788%. That's phenomenal. I'm unsure of anything out there that gives you that kind of an ROI. So let's look at the facts. Oh, and by the way, there's this good question here. I love it. How do the coaching facts on productivity correlate to the Evanos forgetting curve? And you're absolutely right in there, because think about it. If people go to training and then they're forgetting more and more, the percentage goes up over time, they're losing the value of what they gained in the training. Hence, bringing in the coaching to really work with individuals on identifying for themselves. Here's what I learned. Here's how I'm going to apply it. This is what I'm doing with it. Here's how it's working. Here's what I'm going to change or tweak, and getting very intentional in terms of their application and follow through with it. So it's a way to move past that forgetting piece. Here's another statistic for you. Fortune magazine. Business coaching is attracting the top CEOs because it works. And the article explained the average return on investment is 600%. I hope you're as excited about those numbers as I am. To me, it's amazing. This one's going to knock your socks off. Triad Performance Technologies, and they very specifically looked at sales coaching in the telecom industry. And the ROI found there was 1,000%. Absolutely incredible. Forbes magazine did an article and they asked the question, do you have a coach? If not, you could be limiting your career success. So let's back that up with research. Amoco, which is part of British Petroleum now, did an evaluation over a 10-year period of time. I love the longevity of that study. And what they found is the people that had a coach had 50% average higher, on average, higher salary increases. Phenomenal. And the people that had a coach attributed that to the coaching they received. So of course that's exciting. It makes you think to yourself, okay, how can any of us not have coaching? That's an amazing difference. What an impact. So another quick one, 86% of companies use coaching to sharpen the skills of individuals identified as future leaders, your high potentials inside of the organizations. Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology talk about coaching to make the development and implementation of strategies more successful. So huge, huge impact. Clearly, training is there to provide information. We've got to have it. And coaching as an add-on ensures ownership, buy-in, and follow through. So let's dig into what that really means for us as trainers. First off, I'm going to give you the foundational information around coaching. These are the core competencies of a coach as identified by the International Coach Federation. The first area of competency is called the foundation. And in that area, we have a competency of demonstrating ethical practice. And there's a very specific code of ethics to coaching, and it is unique and different than other codes of ethics. It also includes the competency of embodying a coaching mindset. Here's what's significant to us as trainers with the coaching mindset. It's going into that room, whoever's there in that training program, recognizing them as being capable and honoring that and knowing they really can figure it out and they really can do it, and giving them control so that they own learning, so they own application, so they own doing. Our second area of competency includes establishing and maintaining agreements. In the coaching space, we do this in 3 different ways. We do it in an initial conversation with somebody. Hey, what is coaching? What isn't coaching? To get clarity around that. We actually have written agreements. And please note, for those of you inside organizations, the agreement with the sponsor is different than the agreement with the person that's actually being coached. The third way that we work in terms of establishing the agreement is every single coaching session. The coach is asking the client, what do you want to focus on today? What specifically do you want to accomplish in this conversation? How will you know this conversation was successful? And gaining the clarity around what the client's going to gain while we're talking. The next competencies in this category include cultivating trust and safety. The trust and safety lead to the client being comfortable, very openly talking and sharing. It's a safe place. It's essential that the confidentiality is protected. This is an area inside of an organization to be aware of, because the confidentiality of client information in a coaching engagement is different than it is inside of an organization. So learning about that difference, recognizing it so that it really is that safe place for them. And then maintaining presence. And I'm guessing you have some ideas of what that means. Let's expand on it. As a coach, truly being in the moment and aware. That means letting go of everything else going on in our heads, and it's 100,000% focus on the client and what it is for them. Our next area of competency includes listening actively and evoking awareness. In coaching, there are questions that are completely different than in any other field, and the coaching questions are absolutely powerful. Our fourth area of competency is cultivating learning and growth. And as coaches, how are we facilitating the client in terms of them taking ownership of their learning and growth and applying it and moving it forward? So in terms of application, what does that tell us? For those of you that are in the HR field, human resources, coaching skills are also a competency area. What's included? Well, part of it is really understanding personal styles, learning styles. It's knowing how to ask questions in the conversations you're having. Coaching activities include empowering productivity. So instead of us trying to fix it for them, putting them in charge of addressing it for themselves and supporting them in how they're advancing their own career. The application in organizational development includes recognizing thought patterns, asking open questions, and the activities include creating buy-in for the change. And I'm guessing many of you have experienced changes, especially in recent times, that getting people to buy into it is just a challenge. We all are functioning differently right now. And how are they buying into that and owning what the change is and how they're managing it? So truly empowering their ownership with that. As trainers, the awareness of learning styles is powerful. And I'm guessing for some of you, you're thinking, well, that's pretty basic. We're used to knowing visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and working with those different styles in the training room. Absolutely. And we're going to take it even further when you add the coaching skills. How can you identify it in the moment? And what are the additional ways of using learning styles to work with that individual client? For example, knowing how to ask that person a question based on their learning style, knowing how to empower their ownership of what it is they want to achieve through application of learning styles. So very specific tools. And then, of course, the questions that are used. What's interesting is as a trainer, when you ask a question, you have a pretty good idea of what the answer is going to be. You're used to it. You've heard some of these answers before. You know where it's going. When you're a coach, we know it's a powerful question when we're totally surprised by the answer. They went a direction we hadn't even thought of, and that's a good thing. Activities that happen, the follow-up for application. So a really simple thing as a trainer is set the people in the room up at the beginning. For example, when we start the training program, say, all right, everybody, get a piece of paper out. You're going to keep this one over on the side. And at the top of the paper, you're going to write my action steps based on this information. And then all day long, as we go through this content, you're going to go back to that paper and give yourself action steps. And then as you move through the content you're giving them in that training program, asking them, okay, what are you doing for an action step with this? How are you using this? And inviting them to, throughout the day, go back to that piece of paper and give themselves action steps. It's a fabulous tool that adds value in your training. So it's an application of the coaching there. Another one is the accountability piece. So instead of the accountability being on us as trainers, yes, we're accountable to making sure the content we're providing is valuable, applicable, appropriate, that we're presenting it in a way that works, that we're working with all the different learners that we have. We have lots of pieces of accountability. What we're talking about here is the accountability of the learner. What is their accountability for taking and using this information and following through on it and checking, gee, how's it working? Adjusting as they go. So really giving them the ownership. And again, that can be something that is built in to how you do your training program. So if we go further with this, coaching skills that you use when you're training, you're going to ask the participants for the answer. You're used to doing that. We're going to go deeper. We're going to ask follow-up questions. We're going to ask for different possible answers and expand on that. Ask the participants how they will use the information. Get them brainstorming with each other. Some of the activities that you can do during a training include self-reflection, where they're thinking about it and really taking time for themselves, their own awareness. We're talking brainstorming, and there's so many different activities you can do in a training class involving brainstorming. And then, of course, role plays. Now, big challenge with role plays. I'm unsure about any of you. I've had pushback even just on that term role play. So what I say is, okay, this isn't a role play. This is a practice. We're practicing this conversation or this type of conversation or this activity or whatever it is. Just a funny tweak depending on who your audience is. So what does this mean to us? Coaching is truly the bridge between planning, training, and effective implementation, because the focus is on that individual and their action. So when we start planning and moving into that, it is on us to make sure we're aware of time for training and that we're aware for time for coaching. Yes, coaching skills apply all the way through the training program, and we want to get very specific and intentional with using these coaching skills. So what are some of those coaching skills we're talking about using? And then we get to get into the really good stuff about how to do that. So first off, the people skills, recognizing different personal styles and knowing how to flex. So one of the hot areas in the corporate space right now is the whole diversity and inclusion. And we have different people and they all function differently. And how can we recognize that and respect that and honor that and flex based on what it is for that other person? And this applies even when they're just like us. So we want that across the board. We're looking for the communication skills. Oh my goodness, we're all familiar with the challenges that communication bring in terms of the conflicts that come up. So truly having the listening skills, and here's the irony around listening. Most of us say, yeah, I'm a pretty good listener. And if you ask people, do you think others listen well? Most people say, oh yeah, no, not so well. So we definitely hear that. And it's how are we really doing our listening and specific techniques for that. Assertive language, the irony around how we say what we say is that 70% of the population is primarily passive, 30% are primarily aggressive. And what we really want is assertiveness. Yet the reality is only 5% of the population have learned and consistently apply assertive communication. That's incredible. And what does that mean for us? For us as trainers, we're far more effective when we use assertiveness and we model it for people in the room. When it's appropriate, it's the content of our training. And then, of course, questions and how we ask questions. I've got some great tips for you coming up on that one. We'll also talk goal setting. How do we really create change and motivate follow through with this information? So that's a heads up on some of the how that we're going to dig into more deeply. Before we do that, I want to do a quick check-in. I'm very curious from all of you what level of knowledge you already have on coaching skills. So have you done an initial introductory training? Have you done nothing at all? Have you done training and even gone through certification, etc.? So please let me know. Really curious where you're at on it, because we're going to dig into some of the specifics. So we're starting to get a few responses. We've got somebody that's totally new. We've got a 2-day training on practice-based coaching, excellent cognitive coaching trained. Wow, so even just in those first 3 responses, we've got the full gamut as far as what people know on coaching skills. So this is going to be lots of fun. As we dig into this, this is, of course, the real content, the part where you can start taking this information and using it right away. So ask your questions, because we want to make sure that you're getting the maximum value out of the conversation. So let's move into it. First off, how do you recognize and adjust to different personal styles? This is something that we cover in coach training, and it's incredibly valuable. Now, to get started, I'm guessing that many of you are familiar with some of the different assessments that are available, and there's a lot of great assessments. There's the Myers-Briggs, the DISC, the Berkman. You can think about Strength Finders. You can think about the one we use on colors. There's so many different fabulous assessment tools. So the key difference to be aware of between an assessment tool and simply recognizing and adjusting is that an assessment tool is a validated instrument. It takes time to take the assessment, and the results are going to be very detailed and in-depth. What we're talking about in terms of application for a coach is in the moment awareness. Right this second, okay, who are they right now? And when the topic changes, their thinking changes, something emotional comes up, whatever it is, they're going to change. We're different at different times based on what's going on. And so as a coach, I've got to be truly present to who they are right this moment. And when that changes, I've got to change with them. So we're setting that up. Very specifically, we'll talk emotion and logic. Now, statistically, 50% of our population are primarily emotion and 50% are primarily logic. We're evenly split in that. Now, I do get asked, and the answer is yes, we use both. We're different at different times. So, for example, when I'm home with family, I lean toward being more emotion-based. When I am at work, I lean toward being more logic-based. Different people are different situations. Now here's another one, passive and aggressive. You already heard me mention the statistics on this one. 70% passive, 30% aggressive. So that's our breakout there. Well, again, we all use both. When I'm home, I tend to be on the more passive side. When I'm working, I tend to be more aggressive. Other people are the opposite. There's not a right or wrong with the different styles. It's knowing that we all have different styles and what are they. So when you think about the different people that we engage with, that we're involved with, they have their style and they interact with people that have different styles and they perceive those different people differently. So I'll give you an example. I had somebody contact me and they were struggling with a new boss. And the person said, you know, I love going into work early. It's quiet. I can focus. I'm by myself. I get things done. I'm very organized. And then my boss will come barging in and say, hey, how are you doing? And just totally interrupt me. It's so frustrating. And then when I go to a meeting, I very carefully lay out all the information. I've got it organized. I'm clear on explaining it. And I'll look at my boss and his eyes are glazed over. He's totally bored. He's not even paying attention to all the work I've done. So as the client is explaining this, my awareness is my client is passive and logic in his style. My client's boss is emotion and aggressive. And it isn't that his boss is being rude when he comes in and says, hey, how are you? That's his boss's style. And the same is true in the meeting. The boss in the meeting wants to move fast, talk quickly, get through it, whereas the client wants to be very clear and planned out. So they're simply different. And by having that awareness and knowing, hey, it isn't right or wrong if I'm emotion or logic, passive or aggressive, it's what is it? And how do I want to adjust? And how do I want to interact with other people? What's going to make it work? So if I'm a trainer in the training room, first off, it's helpful to know that half the people in the room are emotion, half the people are logic. So what does that tell me? That tells me, okay, the logic people want to know exactly where we're going in this training program, what our plan is. They want to know we have a specific purpose and outcome that we're after. The emotion people, they want to have some fun and some interaction and engage with each other. They're all in the same room. The passive people in my room are going to be quiet. They're going to be the last ones to speak up. The aggressive people, they'll think out loud. They're excited about jumping in or very much interested in demonstrating their expertise. So your experience with having all those different styles in the room, it's knowing they're going to be there. Now, take it further with coaching, because in coaching, we look at, okay, how do I adjust to each person on an individual level in a way that truly works for them and works for their ownership? So there's techniques we do as a trainer, and we can take it even further when we build on that with the coaching techniques. Knowing if their emotion, I'm going to ask a question about how they feel. If they're logic, I'm going to ask about how they think. If they're passive, they're going to think quietly. If they're aggressive, they're going to think out loud. Passive wants more time. Aggressive wants to jump in. So how can I adjust during the training to work with each style and to accommodate all of the styles? I can start my training by letting them know where we're going to go, and I can make sure I incorporate the interaction throughout, as long as I let my logic people know this is what we're going to gain from this interaction. And when they know where it's going and what the value is, they're going to go along with it. So, bit of insight simply on style. Now let's keep going. And
Kathy, this is Alexa here from IACET. We had a participant make a note. She's interested in the difference between aggressive versus assertive. Would you be able to speak on that just a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. I love that question. So first off, people that are aggressive don't like that term. So they call themselves assertive. That's what they do. And I get it, because assertive sounds better, right? So in terms of what it means, if we go into definitions, a passive person literally violates their own rights because they hold back on expressing their opinion. They let everybody else go first. An aggressive person is the opposite. They violate others' rights in terms of they speak out, they give their opinion, they'll tell you your opinion too. And by the way, my description is our extremes. When you look at the research that's behind all the different personality style assessments, for example, the Myers-Briggs, the DISC, the Berkman, the colors, all of the different research, and it dates back to Plato, you're going to find the numbers of 70% and 30%. Now, I have people on both sides say, well, gosh, I don't like that definition. I do a pretty good job of balancing that. Well, when we balance passive with aggressive, what we get is passive aggressive. And what's the definition of that? We violate everybody's rights all at the same time. And people say to me, oh, I don't do that. And I'm going to say, are you human? We all do it. Let me give you an example. You go into a restaurant. You're not happy with the quality of the service, something. And you don't say anything. You simply leave. And then after you leave, what do? Well, you tell everybody else what lousy quality of food or service or whatever it was. That's called passive aggressive. You didn't respect yourself enough while you were there to get the problem addressed, nor did you respect that place of business enough to give them the opportunity to address it. So that's an example. And by the way, we all use passive aggressive. As a matter of fact, my husband's heard me teach this information, and I'll say something at home and he'll say, that was passive aggressive. And I'll go, yeah, that was. So we all do it. That's okay. We're human. Now, in terms of assertiveness, it's actually a learned skill. It is not normal or natural to human beings. It's something that we learn. It takes actively going out and getting the information and practicing with it over time to truly learn assertive communication. It involves how we say what we say. It means that instead of primarily focusing on telling, we focus on asking. We focus on the solution instead of the problem. And we truly honor and respect other people in terms of engaging them in the conversation, sharing opinions, etc. And it takes practice. It's a different style of communicating. So hopefully that helps with what that is. Let me know if you have a follow-up question to that. That'd be awesome. All right. In the meantime, moving us into how you ask questions. I'm going to give you the 4 hottest tips in terms of coaching questions. Of course, there are more. This is something that you can take and use right now. Now, many of you have heard the acronym KISS. Unfortunately, probably inappropriate for me to say what that means here. So I'm going to let you sit with that one. What I will say is we do a variation on the term KISS. And that is to say, keep it short and simple. So in coaching, the shorter the question and the simpler the question, the more powerful the question. And it's funny because that's counterintuitive to many. What happens is we think, oh, we want to have a profound question. We want to include a little bit of explanation in our question. We're figuring out how to ask it. And our question gets circuitous, or we start stacking questions, or we ask a question and then we give them the answers, or whatever else is happening. Short, simple questions are powerful, and they truly provoke the other person to think. The next piece to this is that questions focus forward. So we're very commonly using questions that talk about in the past, what's happened, what occurred, or even where it's at. In coaching, we focus on the future. What do people want? How do they want to get there? And we focus them on where they're going in the future. Another huge tip is we're truly open to the possibility. Back to what we said earlier, this isn't about asking a question where I know the answer. This is about asking a question where I get to be surprised by the answer. Truly open to what it may be. And this is huge, there's 2 words that most of the questions start with, and they are what or how. Sometimes people say, oh, I want to be creative or move into different things. Well, think about it. If your question starts with the word is, any, can, do, will, it's a closed question. And chances are it's going to be a leading question. So sticking with what or how questions is a huge tip in terms of coaching. That's something we can apply right away in the training room. We can think about what questions we're asking people. And instead of saying to somebody anything else, which is really trainer speak for, I don't really want you to say anything else, I just want to move on, we can ask what else and truly invite more input. Quick tips there. And slight pause. I'm ready to move into another area in terms of what happens in coaching. And this is powerful. So some of you are familiar with thought patterns. Some of you are unfamiliar. That's what we're talking about here. So one pair of thought patterns is what's called toward versus away, otherwise known as meta programs. The toward thought pattern is somebody saying what they do want. The away thought pattern is somebody talking about what they don't want. So for example, if I say to you, I want to quit smoking, I'm actually telling you what I don't want, and I'm less likely to achieve that. If I tell you I want to lose weight, I'm telling you what I don't want. I don't want the weight. I want to lose it. So instead, in coaching, what we know to do is ask people what they do want. Okay, so after you lose weight, what size or weight will you be? Oh, well, then I'll weigh 200 pounds or whatever the number is for that person. And then you say, okay, so your goal is to weigh 200 pounds. And they say, yeah, that's my goal. So now they're talking about what they do want. Let me give you one more analogy here. Pretend that you are a travel agent. I come into your office and I say, I want to book a vacation. And you say, great, where do you want to go? And I say, well, I don't want to go. And I tell you all the places I don't want to travel to. And you're sitting there going, okay, how can I book that? How do you buy a plane ticket to not there? You got to know where I want to go. The same is true when it comes to goal setting and people focusing on where they're going. So when you're doing a training class and people start talking about what they don't want it to be, ask them, what do you want it to be? And keep them focused on what they're moving toward. And I'm hoping that's clear. Slight pause here while I give you a chance if there's any follow-up questions to it. And I'm going to go ahead and move into an additional, okay, good. I got the comment that it was clear, makes sense. Thank you for that. Our next set of meta programs is what's called internal versus external. And this is the source of motivation. So imagine you have somebody that's working on a project or even a team, and you ask them what it means to complete the project. And if your response is, oh, well, then the boss won't yell at us or we won't get in trouble or whatever, they're externally motivated because they're doing it for someone else or to avoid a consequence. That's called external motivation. What we're looking for to truly create ownership is somebody's internal motivation. What does it mean to them personally? Oh, well, it'll feel good to complete this. And yeah, when we complete this project, it looks good on my resume, or it gets me some notice in the organization to help me advance, or whatever it is. So when you're doing a training class, think about how you can bring that into the room. How can you invite people to reflect on what it means to them personally and what it does for them personally when they take this information, this concept, and they use it? Because then you're building that ownership. Our third meta program is what's called, took me just a sec, I didn't push hard enough, proactive versus reactive. Many of you are familiar with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and he talks about being proactive. If somebody is waiting for someone else or waiting for something else to happen, they're being reactive. They're less likely to get there. If they take action, they're more likely. So here's my example. Maybe somebody wants a promotion and you say, great, how are you working toward that? And they say, well, in 6 months, I have my review. They're being reactive. They're waiting for that to happen. So a coaching technique is to say, okay, in between now and the time of your review in 6 months, what can you do to increase the likelihood of earning the promotion? And put them in charge of looking at what they do control and what they can do to move it forward and advance that. So with these meta programs, here's what we're expressing. When you have somebody talking about what they don't want, ask them what they do want. When somebody is explaining the external drivers for doing something, ask about their internal motivation. And when somebody's being reactive, ask them what they can control. Okay, so I'm pausing. I'm going to shift gears and move into something different. So I'd love to do a quick check-in with all of you. Is the pace working for you? Is the information making sense? What's your reaction? What are your thoughts up to this point? So I'd love to have something typed into that question box so I make sure I'm on the right track for you. Okay, I'm getting that. You're loving it. You're loving the pace. Good. Thank you for that. Hopefully okay, good. Keep going. All right. We're getting that message. Excellent. Thank you. So what are some activities that you can do as a trainer while you're doing a training class? So one thought is the self-reflection, literally giving people time to pause. You can do that by saying, hey, take a few moments, everybody just quietly in your own space. What are your thoughts or feelings about this information? And then after you give them a few private moments to do that, you can invite whatever they want to share with the larger group. It's literally creating the space for them to actually think about it. Another one is inviting the group to explore, how does this information apply for you? and they can talk about it. One of the books that I really love for trainers is by Ken Blanchard, and I'm guessing many of you are familiar with them. And the book is called Know Can Do, K-N-O-W as compared to N-O. So knowledge, know, can do. And in that book, he talks about one of the reasons people don't do anything differently is that human nature is to resist a new concept. And so it's literally asking them, how does this apply? Because we're moving on past that initial resistance to really thinking about, okay, I can tweak it like this, or here's what it means to me, here's how I can take it forward, and giving them the space to consider that. And as we mentioned earlier, the idea of having that piece of paper on the side that they go back to all day long, and they give themselves action steps for implementing their own learning, and inviting them throughout the training to take a moment and jot that down. So, a couple of great self-reflection things you can do during training programs. Also on that list is the question game. This is just a bonus one. For example, you make a statement, and now the conversation is going to continue with everybody in the room. Nobody's allowed to actually answer the question. Nobody's allowed to make another statement. Everybody is invited to take whatever question was asked and ask the next question based on that question. So the entire conversation consists of questions to keep it going and carry it forward, and play with that. An alternative option, if you want to play with question games, is to put people in small groups and have them develop a list of questions. And then they get points based on it being an open question and a short question. And so it becomes a game or a competition for them to figure out as many open-ended short questions as they can. So have fun with it. That's a great group activity. Another one that you can do is brainstorming. So I'm guessing many of you are very familiar with this. One tweak I've done on the brainstorming game. So we have somebody define a challenge and everybody contributes ideas. If we have a big room, we can put them in small groups. And in their small group, somebody says, here's my challenge. The other people in the group all brainstorm ideas, as many ideas as they can possibly get out in whatever time period you give them. And then they trade places and somebody else has a challenge. The brainstorm, and here's very important, means we're just throwing out ideas. Zero explanation, zero decision on any one of them. It's truly getting ideas out. Because whoever the individual is with the challenge, they can choose from the ideas later. They can explore them deeper later. An alternative to this, and maybe some of you have experienced this, where you want to get a brainstorm going and you're stuck, having a hard time getting people involved and throwing ideas out. Do what's called a reverse brainstorm. And maybe you've heard of this. I think they're fun. You say to the group, okay, we don't want any good ideas. We only want stupid, dumb, crazy, ridiculous ideas. And you have them come up with some stupid, dumb, crazy, ridiculous ideas. And what happens is, number one, you're breaking the ice. And number two, you're taking the pressure off. Sometimes people are afraid to throw out an idea because they don't want to be laughed at or seen as stupid or whatever it is. When it's a reverse brainstorm and we invite the stupid, dumb, crazy ideas, they can throw something out without any risk whatsoever, and you'll get people laughing and you'll get the ideas flowing. And then we build on it. We say, okay, now give me a couple of mediocre ideas. Nothing great, just a few mediocre ones. And then we say, okay, let's think about a few good ideas. And you go at it backwards. So, fun way to do that. Another great one is our proverbial role play. And again, it's the practicing the conversation type setup. So you can invite a challenge, and then if you want to model it in front of the group, you can do it, or you can invite them to do it. So sometimes what I'll do is say, you be the person with the challenge. So whoever it was that presented, it's usually a challenge they're experiencing with someone else, and the other person is the challenge to them. So I say, okay, you be that person, and I'll be you. And I'll ask them questions and work through a solution for that challenge. And then we can switch places. We can say, okay, now I'll be the person with the challenge, and you figure out how you're going to have the conversation with me. And you trade places. So you give them a chance to be on both sides of it. And it's an amazing process because of the awareness that occurs. So, fun one for you. Moving now into what you can do after training. Think about group coaching. So the people that go through the program, whether they come back as a group or as a team, and we do a session around the content, what they learned, how they're using it. You can, of course, also do individual coaching. Now, of course, these are things I get super excited about. We'll talk about them. In terms of alternatives as an organization, think about a coaching culture. What is a coaching culture? That means that everybody there really sees other people as capable, and there's a lot more questions happening than there is telling. Developing leaders as coaches. Increasingly, coaching is seen as a core competency for anyone in a leadership role. And so looking at what can we offer, what can we do to create that coaching culture? And then, of course, coaching programs. Increasingly, you're seeing that in organizations. So many of you are probably in an organization that has one or is thinking about one. Let's do a quick check in the question box. Curiosity for all of you here. How many of you have a coaching program in your organization? How many of you, your organization is thinking about having a coaching program? Or how many of you not even on the radar screen? So let's get one of those three answers to do that. Okay. And while those are coming in, I'm going to throw out a couple of other things. So the American Management Association did a study, and there are several major findings that they did. Here's one on training for coaches. Basically, you want external training for coaches. And the reason for that is because when we develop the program internally, unless somebody's actually trained in coaching and training coaches, it isn't the same thing. So knowing that that's a best practice. External programs for coaching when they're developed outside. Now, here's what's interesting. While we know that's a best practice and increases success, it's the least often used. So how do you do that? How do you set this up? And by the way, let's go check this out. So we've got a couple of not on the radar coaching program for the highest levels of management only, informal coaching sessions with supervisors, couple more not on the radar, somebody thinking about it, only for leaders and managers, some of the training. So yeah, broad range in terms of what's happening. For those of you that are interested in it, you're probably familiar with this concept because I know you do needs assessment and set up training programs. It's doing the research so that you can demonstrate the value. You want to create organizational buy-in from the top. To support that, anyone who wants to, I'll pop up my email. I have a free white paper on starting and running an internal coaching program. Happy to send it to whoever wants it. So where have we gone in this conversation? Well, we talked about listing specific facts and statistics. So some of them we shared are the 88% productivity gain when you add coaching and the average 600% ROI. We talked about coaching skills to use during training and defining those. And we explored people skills, communication skills, and goal setting techniques. Then we said we're going to explore coaching activities to use during training. We talked about self-reflection, the question game, brainstorming, and role play. And we talked about options to incorporate coaching after training that included group or team coaching and individual coaching. So an additional piece we talked about before I forget is having that coaching culture, leaders that coach, and a coaching program. I want to say thank you to all of you. It's been super fun being here with you. Definitely appreciate it. For those of you who do want the white paper, my email's on the screen. Please capture that. Send me an email and I'll send you that white paper as a PDF. Great tool resource for you in terms of incorporating that coaching where you want it. Thank you so much for having me. I definitely appreciate it. Alexa, if you want me to hang around afterwards for any additional questions, I'm happy to do that. Let me turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We really do appreciate such an informative and engaging presentation. I was very in tune and I really enjoyed it myself. And I know that from what we've seen in the questions panel, many people agree. So thank you so much again. Participants, don't forget to visit our website at IACET, IACET.org for upcoming events, as well as our next professional development webinar. Or if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Kathy at the email on the screen or our home office. You can email info, INFO, at IACET.org, and we will be happy to assist you. But thank you so much again for being here, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.